when it was evening on that day, the first day of the week, and the doors of the house where the disciples had met were locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. Then the disciples rejoiced when they saw the Lord, and Jesus said to them again, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I send you." There was a preacher and his family getting ready to move at conference time. And so while they were at conference, it was in the city where his mother lived, and so his wife said, while you're at some of the conference meetings, I'm going to run over and visit with your mother. And so while she was over visiting with her husband's mother, the mother-in-law became ill, and so was rushed to the hospital, but was doing okay. And so when she got back to her husband, she said, "While I was at the house, your mother gave me 2 pots of Gerber daisies. And she said that now that we're fixing to move, to take these with us, to leave them in the pots for the next 2 or 3 weeks because they'll be perfectly okay. Just be sure you water them. And then when we get to the new parsonage in the new town, then dig up a place in the yard and plant those Gerber daisies in the earth, and they'll just be beautiful in the fall." So he said when the time came, they packed up everything, and in a very special place in the car, he put those 2 pot plants of Gerber daisies. And when they got to the parsonage where they were moving, well, they did what she said. They fixed a special place out in the yard, and they planted those. And about 3 weeks after that, his mother died unexpectedly. And he said that was in August, and he didn't pay much attention to the daisies until one morning on his birthday. He went out in the yard in October to pick up the newspaper. And he said he glanced up, and there were those daisies in the ground, blooming beautifully in the crisp air of that October morning. And he said those plants were special to him because they were the final things that she had given him. They were special. It's after Easter now. What did Jesus leave behind? What was the last and final thing that he gave us? The scripture that I just read. The disciples locked up in that room, scared to death, afraid they're going to be arrested, afraid they're going to meet the same ends that he met. They are terrified. They've got the windows locked, the doors closed. They're going to be accused of stealing his body, they think. They're not even sure of anything. And suddenly, he is standing in the midst of them. And the first thing he says to them is, "Peace be with you." And before he leaves that room, that Easter evening, that was Easter evening, by the way, he has said 3 different times to them, "Peace be with you." That's what he left us. That was his final gift to us. And you noticed always he was suddenly in the midst of them. And this morning, even in the church, as we meet across the world, suddenly he is here. Offering again the final thing, peace. I live with you. We have watched for the last couple of weeks the horrors of Oklahoma City. We have wept and felt the grief of the families of both surviving husbands and wives and parents. But do you know what seems to have happened there? Right in the middle of all of that, he seems to have been standing, saying, "Peace I give to you." One of the real trouble spots of the world continues to be Rwanda. You heard a couple of weeks ago where 1,000 people were shot in one moment, in a rainstorm, men, women, children broke through a barrier and troops opened fire on them. 1,000 died in moments. The tragedy goes on of warring tribes, of families that have lived for years next door to each other, whose children have played together, but who are members of different tribes, and those tribes now take vengeance on each other, and suddenly one day the neighbors come in with machetes and destroy everybody in the household who has been their neighbors, and their kids have played together for years. Strangely enough, Jesus comes and stands in the midst and says, "Peace I leave with you." The call of Gideon in the Old Testament, the Midianites and the Amalekites swept down on Israel every year and warred and fought them. And then there is this little sentence about the children of the East. We're not sure who they were, but they were bad. And they swept down every spring and burned the crops and pillaged and raped and killed and burned. And then God goes to Gideon. But do you know what he says to Gideon when he walks up to him with this terrible task he's fixing to give him? He says, "Gideon, peace be in you. Peace be with you." One of the first things Jesus said to that crowd that day when he walked up to them in that room was, he stuck out his hands and he showed them his scars. And they could see his feet because he would have had on sandals, and they could have seen the scars on his feet. He moved his tunic aside so they could see the scar in his side, and they could see his head so they could see the scars there. But it was like, I have lived in your world, and like you, I have the scars from living in your world. Here they are. Look at them. Do you know it's strange that the animals in the Old Testament who were used as sacrifices had to be unblemished, no scars, perfect, nothing wrong with them, the fleece perfect. They went over them with a fine-tooth comb, making sure they were perfect. They were unblemished. One guy that grew up in the South out in the country said that the highlight of the year for the family was when the mailman brought the Sears and Roebuck catalog. And they sat down in the house with the wish book and just literally soaked in every page of that Sears and Roebuck catalog, of all the beautiful things that they dreamed about and wished about. But you know what he said he started watching? The models' pictures in that catalog. They were all perfect. He said everybody he knew had something wrong with them. Had a scar here, a cataract there, a piece of his ear gone here, a finger gone. Everybody knew had some blemish, some scar, but there were all these people in that catalog. Beautiful people, No scars, no scratches, big smiles, hair fixed, holding their heads and their bodies just right. He said even if you could see their feet, they were all perfect. They were beautiful people. How strange it is sometimes that the church seems to have felt that we are out for the beautiful people of the world. And we say, can I do this in the church, or what will people in the church think of me if I go, or if I have done this or that? And what we forget is, it is the people with the scars in the world that we say, we are here for you. It is the people whose